So the objectives of today's lecture will be studying these schools and understand why it is that they don't allow us to reach the self-realization of our being and to see where they actually lead us. This so that we learn not to mix these schools, these doctrines, right, with this knowledge that we are receiving. Because it's very important that we keep this knowledge pure, that we don't mix it with other theories, with other concepts, because in this knowledge you are going to find all the tools, the synthesized information that anyone needs to awaken their consciousness. So it is important that we learn to keep it pure, right? So let's first talk about theosophy. What is theosophy? Actually, the very word theosophy comes from a Greek root. Example, theos comes or mean God, and sophy mean wisdom. So the word theosophy actually refers to the wisdom of God. And this school, the Theosophical school, appeared in Russia in the late 19th and early 20th centuries and was founded by Elena Petrovna Blavatsky. She was actually an initiated who had as her mission to prevent the dialectical materialism of Karl Marx and Lenin from ending with all the spiritual principles of that region of the planet. So the work of this school, of the Theosophical school, was to fight against skepticism, since this dialectical materialism came actually with the mission of leading the whole world to total atheism through, intellectualism, through this materialistic logic. They were trying to convince the whole world that God or that the spiritual things actually don't exist. So this school, the Theosophical school, had the objective of scientifically demonstrating that the soul does exist, that God, that everything that is spiritual, things that we cannot see with our physical eyes, but that actually exist, they do exist, right? And to this end, this school dedicated to teaching and obviously practicing parapsychology, the different powers of the mind, or a kind of psychic phenomena, astral projection, hypnotism, telepathy, and also the materialization of specters and of mysterious voices, and post-mortem apparitions, the awakening also of all those latent faculties that all people have. And that was what they were at that time practicing, teaching, looking for, doing this to prove, right? To do this scientifically demonstration that all of this that we call spiritual was real. But what happened? That if we study this doctrine, we are going to realize that the objective of this doctrine is not the self-realization of the being, because it doesn't actually teach what we need to achieve the self-realization. It doesn't teach the three factors for the evolution of the consciousness. You see that it doesn't teach how to eliminate the psychological defects, and there in all our psychological defects is where 97% of our consciousness is trapped and is conditioned there. So we actually need to know how to die in ourselves, how to eliminate all those wrong ways of being that we have inside us in order for us to revolutionize ourselves, to awaken our consciousness and to achieve the full self-knowledge. Also, it doesn't teach the need to reach chastity, right? Nor the need to create with the wise use of our sexual creative energy, those existential bodies of the being that are going to allow us to achieve full consciousness in all the dimensions of nature. So it doesn't teach actually how to practice suprasex, how to make a wise use of our sexual energy. And of course, although this school spread throughout the world, thanks to the sacrificial work done by its students, it doesn't focus that third factor for consciousness revolution to teach others to seek their self-realization, to give others the tools so they can get out of this wheel of death and rebirth, so that they can achieve the self-realization of their being. Also, this theosophical school recommends vegetarianism. They teach that mechanical evolution will lead us to enlightenment, and that is not real, because they don't teach that there is involution, and because involution is like the twin sister of the law of evolution. Everything evolves mechanically until one point, and from that point on, it starts the process of involution. So in order for us to achieve the self-realization of our being, we need to revolutionize ourselves. We need to get out of that wheel of evolution and involution. Actually, it is not real that we are going to be evolving until we become, by matters of passing the time, that we are going to become angels, that we are going to become supermans. No, that is not true. So we need to make a revolution of our consciousness if we really want to achieve that. So as we can see, it only sought to keep all those spiritual hopes alive and latent in people, so that they don't fall into the most absolute materialism. That was actually the purpose of that school, right? Now let's talk a little about what is Spiritism. Spiritism, or spiritualism, which is the same, is a system of belief or a religious practice, based on the supposed communication with the spirits of the dead, especially through mediums. This was a doctrine developed in the second half of the 19th century, in which figures such as Allan Kardec participated. This school teaches the technique to achieve communication with the soul of the dead, or what they call the spirit of the disembodied person. But it happens that what these spiritualists call spirit is not the real being of that disembodied person, but is only a psychological eye or a legion of defects of a disembodied person. Other times, those who attend the seances are not even the psychological eyes of someone who have died, but entities, actually demons, from the infra dimensions, that pose most of the times as saints, as enlightened masters, etc., in order to give favors to those who attend there, in exchange for linking them to them, right, to constantly steal their energy. So through these demons, or through the defects of the disembodied person who arrives at the seances, receive information. Also there, sick people get cured by those entities. Material problems, yes, are solved, etc. But to what extent, right? Because we are not actually communicating with something real. I mean, with something real, spiritual, with something superior. We are just communicating with inferior things, with things from the infra dimensions, right? You can see that in a science, several people, they gather around a table and they hold hands, and while holding hands, they invoke in chorus the presence of a certain spirit. And usually that spirit is asked to manifest itself through the moving things, right? To making noises, etc. Sometimes tables like Ouija are used for this purpose. And then the disembodied person takes possession of one of the participants, who lends his physical body for the manifestation of this entity. And when that spirit takes possession of the body of the medium, he begins to speak with the voice that he had when he was alive, that person was alive. And those who are present there ask different questions, and the disembodied person answer all those questions. But what this spiritualist calls spirit, as I was saying, is not the real being. It's a defect one of the many defects from the psychology of that disembodied person is not the real being. And the biggest problem that these practices represent is that most of the people who participate in this end up like creating dependency to this, since they get used to having all their physical and all their spiritual concerns answered there, and therefore they don't seek the guidance of their own inner being, right? And also, as I was saying, they are linked to these negative entities, and as they temporarily resolve their situations, they usually recommend other people to attend these places, leading more and more people to become dependent on these practices, right? And usually, all those people that attend the seances are convinced that they have communicated with a saint or with a god. None of them suspect that it is a demon or that it is a psyche or the legion of a disembodied person who doesn't have a vehicle of physical expression and is using the medium for to that extent, right? And in the different healing procedures that take place on those seances, they even actually perform surgeries, and many of those healed are cured, definitely, increasing their dependence on these procedures. And the schools of spiritualism grew enormously in the last century and have been recruiting millions of believers and followers. Okay, and well, as we can see at a simple glance, this procedure in no way seeks the self realization of our being, so it is actually not useful when we want to awaken our consciousness, because in no case the elimination of the psychological defects is stopped here, nor it is given the knowledge on how to achieve the scientific chastity, how to make a wise use of our sexual energy, how to sacrifice for humanity, right? And well, as the Master Jesus taught, by their works you will know them. So if we see the kind of works that spiritualists do, they are all black magic works: divination, advice, love cell, prayers, rituals. We have word reading, candle rituals, domination, infliction of diseases, cures of diseases, etc. But cures without taking into account the will of the divine law, right? So it is like curing something, but above the will of the law, without taking it into account. So it is actually a black magic work. So it is not useful for us when we really want to achieve something superior, when we want to know ourselves, when we want to awaken our consciousness, right? And well, that is the second school. Let's take a look then to what is a medium. The medium is a passive receptive subject who gives his matter, who lends his physical body and his motor center to all those metaphysical ghosts from beyond the grave, right? The medium is that person through whom the entity that comes from the infra dimensions is going to manifest in this sense. And in order for this entity to enter the medium's body, the medium has to turn his astral body forward so that the entity can enter through the motor center. And the mediums, are people who have like a great sensitivity, that allows them to perceive parallel planes to this one and to communicate with these entities that move in these lower dimensions. And many of them are actually convinced that through these procedures, they are really helping others with what they call their gift. In addition, many are convinced that they are lending their bodies so that superior beings, spiritual masters, ascended masters can manifest themselves through their bodies. And well, it is important that we understand that for the White Lodge, in the superior worlds, each human being, either male or female, is qualified as the living temple of a master or a divine spark, right? And that temple is highly respected by all hierarchies, and hence the importance to understand that no master of the White Lodge, expresses himself through a foreign vehicle, right? A superior being would never manifest himself through a foreign physical body. When a master needs to manifest or come into this three-dimensional world, he first sends his person or physical body to prepare, and later he can manifest through his own vehicles. But he comes to his own house, not to someone else's house. Okay, and if the let's say the real being, the consciousness of someone wants to let you know something, they directly go and through, for example, an astral experience, they let you know what they need to communicate. And if someone wants to communicate with the real being, with the consciousness of someone who passed away, they just need to achieve a conscious astral projection and go there, for example, go to the limbo and ask anything they need to ask to that person who passed away. So it is not necessary that we go through to a science. It is not necessary that we lend our physical body to be a medium for doing these procedures. And actually, lending the body to be a medium generates very strong karmas. The most common karma of mediumship is epilepsy and madness. All epileptics were mediums in previous lives because this is actually a karma. And even after death, the medium continues to be possessed by these entities, since at first he gives his body at will, right? They like led these entities to break a seal that we all have and that protect us from any other entity to take our physical body. When they decide to do this for the first time, they give their permission, so that deal is broke. So that seal, sorry, is broken. But after that, the entities continue to possess his body without his consent, and that is actually what happens with the epileptics, right? And after a certain time, the person ends up completely distancing himself from his own divine being, and they enter the involution as anyone else. And well, that is like the end of by doing this practice. So every person who has a karma of mediumship will have to reflect on this, right? And we have to work on themselves to disintegrate these works, working on those selves or psychological elements of mediumship and paying the karma, so they stop paying for this with pain by doing conscious sacrifice for humanity. And well, as we saw, these schools, although they seem very attractive because they seems like to have the answer to problems that we may have in life, actually they really don't lead us to achieve the purpose of our existence, which is to become one with our own inner being. So the invitation is that we study our theosophical selves, because we all have those selves, those who think that the awakening of consciousness is about experiencing paranormal phenomena, about developing powers, these defects in us that will always move away from what is really important: to die in ourselves, to be born spiritually, and to sacrifice for humanity. We must also work on eliminating our spiritualist defects, those who are always looking for someone external, to give us the solution, to give us the answer, that we actually must look for in our interior, with our own inner being. In addition to the fact that if we have participated in these kind of sessions, we must work on all the psychological defects that led us to participate in those practices. And finally, of course, we must observe, study, right, our medium selves, those who want like to generate dependence on others, either by interpreting their astral experiences or by trying to bring them reasons from the internal worlds. Like, for example, your inner being told me to tell you that is not real. If the inner being wants to say something to anyone, they are going to communicate directly with that person. They are not going to use you as a medium to let other people know what they must do. Okay? If we have this knowledge, what we must do is to learn people to communicate. We give the people the tools so they can communicate with their own inner being. That is their true guide and their true master. And everyone should follow his own inner master, right? And well, this is today's topic. If you have any question, remember to leave us your questions there in the comment box. And I want to invite you to the next conference where we will talk about another very interesting topic. We are going to talk there about that character who has been known as Lucifer, Devil, and Satan, to understand the reality behind this character. Okay, so let me see if you have any questions. Well, over here Carla says good afternoon, Carla, and she asks if a child has a few paranormal experiences, like to see or sense spirits, is because has a connection to them from a previous life. Well, that could be the reason, but remember that when we are like childs, we have like more consciousness awakened than a grown-up. The 3% of consciousness is awakened in a small child. So this 3% gives them the ability to see their own psychological defects, his own inner entities, those demons that are there trying to enter the physical body, but they cannot do so yet because the child hasn't created the personality that allows these demons, these inner demons, to start manifesting through the physical body. We learned about that in the lecture number 30 of the phase A, the method to awaken consciousness, where we can see that this actually happens. So that can be something that the child has still enough consciousness, and that consciousness gives him the sensibility to perceive these entities that are actually his own entities, and can be the other case. How can we know for sure? In the case, we can ask in the astral plane to know what is the cause, and that way when our inner being gives us the answer, we can know for sure what is the situation happening there. Okay, and well guys, thank you very much for being here. Remember that if at any point you have any question, you can leave your question there in the comment box of the video, and we will be answering your question. And if you want to be part of our groups, WhatsApp or Telegram, here in the description of this video you can find the link to join the group, right? And well, thank you very much for being here, and see you the next time. Bye bye.